Hello, my name is Sandra Long-Weaver, and I'm the editorial consultant for the Tennessee Tribune. And today we're interviewing Dr. Earl Richardson, who's the President Emeritus of Morgan State University. And we're talking about the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Equality Suit. Dr. Richardson, tell me how this suit came to be and when it came into existence. I know you were president of Morgan from 1984 until 2010. So this happened under your tenure, and I know you had a leadership role in it.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here, and thank you for asking the question. I was at Morgan at the time that the suit was filed in 2006. And I think it was the result of a community group that had come together to try and get the state to improve the conditions and the circumstances of our historically black colleges in Maryland. We have 4 there. We have the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, we have Coppin State University, we have Bowie State University, and of course we have Morgan State University. And I think it is fairly well known that there have been many studies about the conditions of our historically black colleges, and that there has not been the kind of investment in those institutions that have been made in other public universities. And this came about, as I might add, a group coming together other than the university itself to say that
a community group of
yes,
alumni? Or
it's alumni, students, friends of the university, faculty members, that said, we have been struggling with this issue for a long time. And with higher education becoming so much more competitive, that if we're going to, in fact, continue to do what we do best, then we're going to have a more significant investment, a more fair investment in these historically black colleges and universities.
Can I just ask you, because you've mentioned the conditions at historically black colleges and universities. So Dr. Richardson, I wanted to just chat a minute about what conditions led to this suit in 2006.
Well, I think the conditions had to do with what we describe as very limited missions that led to very limited academic.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but limited missions, and explain that just a little bit for me.
Yes. Well, the mission is indeed the purpose of the university, the functions it serves. And in most of our institutions, particularly with our doctoral granting universities, it is the ability to provide instruction, research, and public service at the various degree levels from the baccalaureate through the doctorate. And that we serve specific populations. For our historically black colleges, for example, we have had the mission of serving a very diverse group academically as well as socioeconomically. And we say we serve the best and the brightest as well as some of those that are at the margin. And it's that broad access mission that we think makes us unique as opposed to our other public universities. Now, some of the conditions themselves is having that very limited mission, having a limited mission that does not carry us into all of the areas which I just described as the purview of a mission for a doctoral research university, but also not having the faculty to do it. Most of our institutions have a very high percentage of part-time and contractual faculty as opposed to regular faculty that are on faculty lines.
Is that because of underfunding?
Underfunding is a critical issue. And then other than funding, is the capacity of the institution to attract faculty and to be able to offer them the career opportunities that other institutions would be able to offer them. So it's two major pieces of that. There's also the issue of financial aid, because our students tend to have greater need than students at our majority institutions. Then having that financial aid available that we can attract those students and to provide for their needs. The facilities at our universities, you are finding that many of us have a very beautiful building here and a very beautiful building there. But what we are looking forward to is for the entire campus to reflect that same beauty, that same attractiveness, that same elegance. So it's all of these conditions that makes our historically black college on the whole less competitive, because they are not comparable in their capacity to deliver on many of these services. Now, having said that, our institution make an enormous contribution to our society in terms of providing educational access in the critical areas that are needed to drive our economy and to promote our communities. And we say that with the contributions that we have already made, we have not even begun to scratch the surface of the potential of these institutions to impact and make contributions, if only they had the resources to do that. And these suits then are designed to move our states toward greater equity and parity in the resources they provide to our historically black colleges versus the traditionally white institutions.
Okay. Now, when you say less competitive, I also thought, and you talked about being able to attract faculty at all different levels. But what about students? Does it make you less competitive in bringing in the students you want?
Very much so. Believe it or not, students, regardless of whether they're black or white, or whether or not they come from urban areas or suburban areas, they live in America, a capitalistic society, and they want the same thing. They want the same quality of education. They want the same quality of life that you will find no matter where they come from. And so those institutions that are able to accommodate them best on those levels, that is, quality of programs, variety of programs, in terms of the financial aid they're able to provide them, the quality of life, that is, in the athletic programs they provide, in the student centers and the social programs they are providing. Well, those institutions that can satisfy best those needs then are more competitive. Yes, there will always be a cadre of students that will come to us, but we're talking about the kind of institution that we were when we were founded. Institutions that attract the best and the brightest, as I said before, as well as students at the margin. We also have to remember that when we're looking at the preparation of our students, sometimes there are challenges. Challenges not because they don't have the ability, but challenges because they have not been in the right places and had the preparation. And we simply say, we take them where they are and carry them to where they ought to be.
I think that's great. Now, what about, does this have an impact on the black middle class? If this suit is not rectified in a way that allows you to be more competitive, can it have an impact across the country on the black middle class?
Well, I think it does, because for every student we educate, particularly for every student that would not otherwise have an educational opportunity anywhere, for every student we educate, that means that our country has less to invest in them when it comes to welfare, when it comes to any of the support systems that they need, and certainly when it comes to our prisons, the public safety aspect of this. And so, yes, it is very much a part of that. As a matter of fact, many of us, as quietly as we keep it, when you come not for an education, but the possibility of finding that young lady or that young man that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And it changes life and the potential for life in one swoop, one swell swoop, because you're then able to not only give an education, but start a life and a family. And that family is already much better off than most of our families were. They could get a job that provides health benefits for them. They get a job that provides for a home and provides for an income to a family. So yes, it does. It is the basis, the underpinning, the foundation for creating that black middle class. Yes, there are going to be some who can go to our majority institutions, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. But we want to make sure that we are able to educate the masses. Mm-hmm. And it's the masses that will make the difference.
That is true. Now, bring me up to date with the status of the suit. I know arguments were made in early 2012, and we're expecting the decision to be made.
Yes, I say that there were various phases through which it went through, and they're not unlike any other issue that is litigated. The first phase, for the first 2 years after it was filed in 2006, it was primarily in the phase of discovery, gathering all the information, gathering all the relevant documents, taking the depositions and all of that. And then in early January 3rd to be more precise, the court began and went for 6 weeks through about the middle of February. Okay. At the conclusion of that, then the judge gave a month or so for them to provide finding of facts and conclusions of law, which, as I understand it, is the essence of the case that each side will make to the court. Following that, we have had rebuttals, the written rebuttals to each of the submissions. And on the 19th of October came in for what we call final argument, in which the lawyers for each side presented their case and gave the judge an opportunity to ask any question for clarification or further evidence. And that took place. And I thought that the lawyers for the coalition for the Maryland Coalition for Excellence and Equity, which is the formal name for the group bringing the lawsuit. Mm-hmm. I thought that they presented their case rather well, and of course the state lawyers had an opportunity to rebut that. I think we're right now waiting for the judge to deliver a verdict, mm-hmm. and that verdict should come somewhere around, we hope, no later than the first of the year, next year. We are hoping that this will be a game changer, not only for the black institutions in Maryland, but across the country. Mm-hmm. Heretofore, we've had cases in Mississippi, we've had cases in Louisiana, I believe, we've had cases in Alabama. And the remedy in many cases have been based on a set of projects that were to get done in a certain time frame. Unfortunately, the time frame has been much extended. I think in Alabama's case was 15 to 17 years. And
that's a long time.
And if I were to say the issue there was, in that time that we were doing the project, that the other public institutions were moving on. They were not standing still.
Right.
So what you end up at the end of the process is the gap gets larger rather than closing.
Right.
And what we hope that in this litigation, mm-hmm. that those issues will be taken into consideration, and that we will not only rectify many of the mistakes that the state has taken in years past, but they will put into place a mechanism that ensures that it is expedited, and that once expedited, that we will then have changes to the laws that put us in that place in the first place.
Okay. And this suit is seeking $2.1 billion, is that right?
Yes.
To rectify these changes. And at what level, what court level is it in?
It is the federal district court.
Federal district court in Maryland.
In Maryland, yes. And the $2.1 billion is not for capital. That's only for operating. The capital budget will be in addition to that.
And the capital would allow you to
For the
upgrade buildings or
upgrade
new
new
buildings.
facilities and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So there's a lot at stake here, but I do believe that it can make all the difference, not just about education, but about the whole issue of race and race relations in our country. You know, when we come together on university campuses and we learn that we're more alike than we are different, it changes our outlook, it changes our attitude, it changes our projection of what can be, and it impacts how we think about race, how we think about the issue that has plagued this country for so long. And so I'm looking beyond the benefits to one institution. I'm looking beyond the benefits to just education. I'm looking to the larger picture of the impact, the potential impact on impacting race relations in our country, and ensure that our country is indeed a true democracy that affords equal opportunity to all.
So do you think it can have an effect on the conversation that we have about race relations? When President Obama was elected in 2008, the feeling, there was suddenly words that this is a post-racial society, which it was given, we all know that is not true. But the changes that can happen because of this lawsuit, do you believe, can push us toward that post-racial society?
Well, I do believe it can, because the reality of races other than blacks then understand the issue and understand what a tragedy this country has imposed on a group of people. You know, Chuck Willie, professor of higher education at Harvard, and he is a Morehouse graduate, and who writes extensively on this. But one of the things he says about our black institutions that they need to attract white students, not for what they can do so much to the black institution, but what they can do for themselves in understanding better the nature of the issues surrounding our black institutions. He said, but in the process, America listens to other whites.
Right.
And if they can tell the story of our black institutions, that the power structure is more inclined to accept it and to consider it. And so if nothing else, having that conversations between black and whites start on our campus, ferment on our campus, and then is cast into the larger community in a way that is acceptable and not threatening, would indeed move this issue of race a long way into the future.
Right. And one final question. I wondered, what impact do you see this suit perhaps having on Tennessee State University, which also has some of the same concerns as they do in Maryland, the HBCUs?
Well, I think one of the things I have not mentioned here is the role that the federal government had played during the Clinton administration. We started down the path of putting pressures on our states to invest in our historically black colleges. And then that kind of was suspended during the Bush administration. and we kind of moved away from that.
Mm-hmm.
But in this instance, I think what we have said here, in the agreements that have come down from the U.S. Office of Civil Rights of the Department of Education, they made an agreement with Maryland in 2000, between 1999 and 2000, that the standard for this agreement was no longer the project by project as I talked to,
Right.
but that the standard would be that we will develop our historically black colleges to be comparable and competitive with the traditionally white institutions
Mm-hmm.
in all respects.
Okay.
And with that standard, that is a standard that may have been implied before, but not pursued as it is in this case. That once that ruling is made, just as in Fordyce,
Mm-hmm.
it will apply across all of our institutions, and Tennessee State will be a part of that.
Right.
I might add to you also that I see this as developmental. We look at the cases that came before and look for the lessons of how we can move to the next level
Right.
in that. And so this is just the next generation of the Tennessee case that brought together University of Tennessee, Nashville with Tennessee State many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it as a part and parcel of the case that started in Mississippi, the Adams case, and then the Ayers case, and then eventually the Fordyce, and certainly with the Knight case in Alabama. So this is just the next generation of that series of litigation intended to make our institutions whole.
Okay. And I know I said final question, but I'd like to ask you to look into the future and tell me, what do you see as the future for historically black colleges and universities?
I see a very bright future for the historically black colleges, because I always say that if they were able to have the impact that they have without the resources, my God, what can happen with the resources?
Mm-hmm.
And not as enclaves for black students, but certainly not abandoning our black students. Our institutions have always been open places. The objective was to ensure that all Americans had the opportunity for equal education, quality of education. And our black institutions provided that for black people, but they did not deny it to whites as well.
All right. Well, listen, thank you, Dr. Richardson. I've enjoyed our interview, and thank you for joining us. And I've learned a lot this afternoon, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you so very much. And I say to you, to all my colleagues who have been presidents of Tennessee State, where we labored in the vineyard together.
That's right.
And I see you have Dr. Hefner's photo here, and he was certainly one of our great colleagues.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.